So I want to say a few words about stabilization of androgenetic alopecia, which is achieved by taking the medication, which is finasteride and oral minoxidil, and ketoconazole shampoo, and using the derma roller. In my practice, that is the cornerstone for achieving stabilization of androgenetic alopecia. Now, let's say somebody is stabilized on the medication. So what do we see and what can we expect? So let's assume this patient comes here and he looks like this, Nor 3 anterior. So then he decides to take the medication. It's the patient's choice. I just make a recommendation. So what happens if the patient gets stabilized? It remains like that, or it gets slightly better. I'd say 10% increase maybe. In some cases more, but let's say 10% maximum. We don't give the medication to say you're going to look fabulous. It's to stabilize the situation. Now the guy is like that or slightly better, and he's happy. He's really happy. He says, he even might say, listen, let's forget about the hair transplant. I'm really happy in this medication, and I'm happy for the patient then as well. He's got it under control. And then for some reason, he stops taking the medication. Maybe 3 years later, 4 years later, and he had no side effects, nothing. He just became complacent and thought, well, my hair looks great. These little bits and pieces of medication I take, surely that won't have a major impact. For some strange reason, some patients do that. And what happens then? What happens then is you will go to where you are genetically programmed to be at that moment in time. So if 5 years down the line, you were meant to be there, you will go there rapidly within 6 months. You'll go from there to there. Then the same patient gets a big fright, comes to my office in a state of panic and says, could you please give me the medication again? And then we do that. And then it stays there. It gets fractionally better maybe, but it stays there. But then the guy says, but I want to look like this again, you know? And then I say, well, I can, but then we have to do a hair transplant. And then sometimes we have to do 2,500, 3,000 follicles or more to make him go from there to there again. Whereas if he just took the medication, he would have remained stable. And the medication is extremely cheap and extremely effective. And that's my recommendation. But everybody has to decide for themselves. We don't put pressure on people to take the medication. It's just advice based on experience and scientific evidence. And without the medication, it won't turn out well with hair transplant or otherwise. So men basically have 4 options if they're seeking hair restoration. They can just leave it and let nature take its course. There's nothing wrong with going bald. People don't laugh at bald men. Might get slagged by your mates a little bit, but that's where it ends. The second option is you can shave your head. Just shave your head. No more problems with hair. I salute those guys. I say, you just solved the problem. The third option is to go for hair restoration surgery. Now, there are 2 distinct paths there. The first path is where the patients don't take the medication. And in my estimation, in the whole world, and I'm not talking about my colleagues who practice medicine like me, where they stabilize the situation. There are many of them. But I'd say in a totality, I have the impression about 95% of cases where they do hair transplants, they don't take the medication, or it wasn't emphasized. And those transplants don't work out. They don't work out. Those people end up here in this practice, many of them, and they weren't consulted here the first time. They come from elsewhere, asking for help. And then it's like the first time they heard about the medication, the importance of that. And in many cases, unfortunately, the donor area is destroyed, and we can't work anything, and we can't make anything work for them from that point onwards. So pay attention to the importance of taking the medication to create stabilization. Or if you're not going to do that, don't waste your money and don't go for a transplant, because there's not a good ending with that. And that's my advice.